right, everyone. Welcome back to IQ Talk. Let's go. Today I'm very honored to be in the presence of the co-founder of Wikipedia, the Chief Information Officer of Everipedia, Larry Sanger. How are you doing, Larry?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
How's your day been so far?
Pretty interesting,
Pretty
actually.
interesting. Where were you earlier today?
I was interviewed by Larry King along with a couple of other people about a blockchain panel. So
Cool. So what was that like?
It was like a lot of panels that I've been on, except the interviewer is a lot better.
He's been doing it for so long.
Oh, yeah. I think he's like 85 or something like that. Yeah.
And I think you're 50, 51?
50,
right?
yeah.
50, and I'm 24. So almost, you're 26 years older than me.
Yeah.
And so Larry King is actually 35 years older than you. You're closer to age
to your
than
age than his. That's right.
So this is your second interview of the day. You were on the panel before, so so you were there with the XYO guys who we have a partnership with.
Right, which is exciting, and you have actually helped to
we both did
that.
Yeah. You had the intro, I kind of locked it down, and now we're working together.
Right.
Yeah, and that led us to being on Larry King Live.
They're good guys.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely excited for that. Just seeing, it makes sense having data, like location data. They have all this location data. We have all this information. It just seems like the perfect marriage to have a partnership.
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely.
Just that the mashup of maps and encyclopedia articles just makes sense.
In the end, it's all just data.
Right, I suppose.
Yeah. So, did you watch Larry King growing up back in the day?
Not too much.
No?
Yeah, we didn't get cable, actually.
You didn't have cable growing up?
No, I didn't. I've never really, I think my parents never felt like they had the need. Yeah.
And you grew up in Alaska?
Yeah. Of course, there was cable up there, but
What was your upbringing like?
Oh, it was I don't know. I don't know how you would describe it exactly. In the first 10, 12 years of my life, it was fairly religious.
Okay.
And my...
was it evangelical? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Evangelical Lutheran.
Okay.
And so... just in terms of that. But then my mom and dad got divorced when I was about 12 or so.
Okay.
And then after that, the family stopped going to church. And in some ways, I kind of felt like I had to take care of myself a little bit when I was a teenager. And
divorce is hard for anyone, especially a teenager.
Sure. And then, without getting into any personal details or anything, I got exposed to, some of the less pleasant parts of life, shall we say.
Okay.
And that kind of inspired me to become more reflective, I think, as I got older.
And that made you move towards philosophy?
Right.
It as like a way to process everything that happened to you in the past, or like also because you had a religious upbringing, which is theology and philosophy, they're very similar, and then you had all these experiences, and then you turned towards philosophy. So did that? Yeah. That all must have had a compounding effect for you to pursue philosophy in the future.
Well, by the way, I should mention two other things. Since you asked, I want to give a relatively complete answer to what my childhood was like, because I don't want to leave people with the idea that it was all just somehow all religious. It honestly wasn't. My dad took us out hiking and fishing and camping,
great outdoors,
especially since it was in Alaska. So
so many beautiful sights up there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, growing up, I'm still short. I'm 5'4.5". The half inch is important if you're that short. Then that made me one of the shortest, if not the shortest kids in class, in all the classes that I was up. And that even though I I had plenty of good friends and so forth, but that definitely colored how things were for me.
When did you first move stateside to the main 48, the lower 48?
Alaska is stateside.
I mean the lower 48.
Yeah. It's well, a lot of people have this sort of like, you know, I know you understand that Alaska is a state, but they still think of Alaska as a foreign place. It is kind of foreign in a way. Yeah. I actually was born in Bellevue, Washington.
Okay.
And I went to Kirkland Elementary School for kindergarten, and Redmond Elementary School for first and second grade. And that was before Redmond was, you know, the home of Microsoft. So yeah.
Predating Bill Gates.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You know that Redmond Elementary or middle school? Oh, it's elementary school, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I know that in Bill Gates' middle school was the only middle school in the country that happened to have a computer when Bill Gates was growing up.
Interesting.
And so Bill Gates actually had a huge advantage because he started working with computers so early in his middle school.
Yeah.
So I remember.
That's interesting.
I read that in Outliers.
Of course, I remember when I was in elementary school, a few times we played with like computer punch cards and things like that. And I think I can't remember the exact context, but there were a few classes.
Actually, Bill Gates might be older than you.
What's that?
Bill Gates might be older than you.
Oh, definitely older than me. Yeah. He's like 60 something.
Okay, so by the time you were in elementary school and middle school, they had the punch cards.
Yes, definitely. But I mean, I'm talking about like when I was probably 9 or 10, so that would have been like 1977 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward. Okay, let's go back to you studying philosophy. You went to Ohio State?
I went to Reed College in Portland, Oregon.
And that's where Steve Jobs went, right?
It is.
Bill Gates, Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Well, he went there for one semester. I actually graduated.
Then you graduated, and then you went to Ohio State.
Yeah, for grad school. That's
grad
right.
School. Mm-hmm. When did the internet start taking off? Was it after you graduated grad school, or was it before?
It was actually during
grad school.
Yeah. So if by the internet you mean the web.
The web. The World Wide Web.
Right. And actually the whole internet, sure. I mean, in the sense that a lot more people like started getting email addresses and doing other things online. But yeah, I mean, I remember the first browsers actually coming out in, I don't know, 1994, 1995.
That's when I was born.
I actually wrote my first HTML, personal homepage in 1995.
Okay.
And then the first informational website that I made was about the Donegal fiddle tradition, the fiddle tradition of County Donegal, Ireland, which is in northwest Ireland.
Ooh.
So,
how long is their fiddle tradition? Does it span back hundreds of years?
Yes, as far as I know. Yeah, it's.
What's the origin myth of it?
Well, it depends on what you mean. I mean, there's different strands that come together, right? I mean, like for example, the fiddle originated in Italy, and a lot of the tunes actually originated in Scotland. And of course, I would say most of the tunes, though, are like the rest of Ireland, originated in Ireland. And a great many actually originated in Donegal itself. And then the style is an interesting combination of Irish and Scottish styles, which is actually one of the reasons that I picked it. But
is this in Northern Ireland with the?
It's actually not Northern Ireland. It's one of the few counties of the ancient province of Ulster that are outside of Northern Ireland.
Oh, okay, Ulster. That was the name I was looking for. Okay.
What's that?
I was like thinking once, because I know the Scots that came over, they're the Ulster Irish.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. They settled in Northern Ireland, but Donegal actually voted to remain in the Republic of Ireland. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I just interviewed Kadar, and he was telling me how he was wolfing, which is a international farming program.
Oh.
And he was in Ireland wolfing, working on farms, and he was sleeping on the side of the road. I wonder if he went through Donegal.
Wow.
Yeah. You can ask him about it. It was really
sure. Absolutely. It is.
Have you been?
Oh, yeah. I've been there 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Now.
Is that where your ancestry is from, I'm assuming?
No, not as far as I know. I think at one point somebody determined that we're like 1/16 Irish or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody seems to have a little bit of Irish. Yeah.
Especially on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, let's roll it back. So
okay.
we were back. You were in 1994, 1995. You created your first webpage.
Mm-hmm.
And how'd you start joining email chains, right? That was the big thing. That was like the first social network, was people communicating through these email chains, right?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first social networks were actually bulletin boards. And they go back to the 1980s. I remember I didn't have it myself. I kind of wanted it, but one of my friends actually showed me some bulletin boards, and you actually would have to make a call. In some cases, it could be a long distance call, and download the messages from some server.
Oh, wow.
Way out in Florida or whatever, and you'd have to configure your modem in just the right way in order to make these sorts of calls, and then of course you'd be on just long enough to download the messages and maybe upload any that you had in return.
That sounds really slow and tedious.
Right, and then this became Usenet, or at least I think more or less evolved into Usenet. You know about Usenet?
I'm not familiar.
So Usenet is another internet protocol that Google, to their shame, took over basically and made it into Google Groups. And I actually don't know. I should know this, but I don't think they continued to support the Usenet protocol, right? But the idea was that your university, for example, or who knows what, actually is sometimes an ISP, would essentially subscribe, not pay money to subscribe, but they would actually set up the stuff they needed in order to basically share these messages across these networks, and they would be reconciled, kind of like blockchain, right?
Yeah, there's so many. When you're explaining that and you're explaining how difficult it was to use, it sounds like the early days of blockchain and
definitely.
Bitcoin. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. And
I'm sure you see it as well.
Yeah. So I mean, some of the first social networks, if you want to call them that, they weren't called that back then. The whole idea of social media in particular, that word that didn't come out until like
the 2000s,
2006, 2008, I think.
Yeah.
More like. Anyway, Usenet was one of the first, and then of course, because more and more people were using email, then there were email discussion lists, and so I actually started one recently, just a couple of weeks ago, just for my friends, because
you're leaving Facebook.
I'm leaving Facebook. I did leave Facebook just 2-3 days ago.
Did you go through the whole process of delete, like it's completely gone and deleted?
Well, Facebook decided not to delete it right away. They insist. And Quora does the same thing. They absolutely insist that you take a cooling off period. That's how Quora puts it. Yes, for 30 days, and then they'll delete your stuff.
So you can't log on for 30 days?
If you try, then they'll, I believe they will revive your account.
Okay.
Yeah, so I haven't, of course, logged on. And of course, you're logged out of every device, which is good thing because I wouldn't want to accidentally log in and anyway, the actual process of either deactivating or deleting your Facebook account is actually pretty easy.
It is easy.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the less apps you are tied to, the easier it is. If you use Facebook to log into everything, then it's definitely going to be a pain to do that.
Well, the most troublesome thing about it was that because Mahbod insists that we use Messenger, I basically had to first delete the Facebook account and then actually make a new account, but just for Messenger.
Oh, so they don't have any of your data.
Well, yeah. So basically, there is another approach to doing it. You can just pause the account. You can just deactivate your account, and then later, if you want, you can reactivate it. But they'll save all of your data, and basically, I don't want them. I don't want to do that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the email chains.
Yeah.
That's how you met Jimmy Wales.
Yeah. That's right.
Was it his email chain, or did you start it, or was somebody else started it?
It was his that I joined. In fact, his was the very first listserv. You call them email chains. Nobody calls them that. So there's a couple different names for it. Listserv is actually one flavor. It was one software. It's probably the most commonly used, or was the most commonly used software. But you can just call them mailing lists. Sometimes people call them discussion lists.
Okay.
Depending on, because there's two different kinds of mailing lists. So there's mailing lists that are discussion lists, and then there's the ones that are announcement lists. So he had one called the Moderated Discussion of Objectivist Philosophy. And objectivist means the philosophy of Ayn Rand. So I was kind of interested in this. I had read a number of Ayn Rand's books at the time. I kind of agreed with her about a fair bit, but definitely not everything. And I was kind of just generally, I have a fairly skeptical cast of mind. Not because I like to refute people or anything, but because I think actually having the truth is extremely important, which is a little strand that we left hanging before. So I remember actually I posted on Usenet, from various things, and I think Jimmy Wales, and he was a grad student at the time too, he reached out to me and said, why don't you join my list? And I said, I had no idea what it was at all. It's like the first thing outside of the web, I think. No, I think.
How many people were on this list?
Few hundred, I think, maybe. Yeah, it was reasonably big. It was reasonably big. It was also very active. Yeah,
just constantly getting emails.
Yeah, and he told me, I actually asked, do some stupid newbie questions of him, and he answered them kind of briefly. I remember. How
did you go from communicating with them over email to building Nupedia and Wikipedia?
After my sufficient experience with that, I actually decided to start a few email groups of my own as well. And so he joined one of mine. Mine was called the Society for Systematic Philosophy. And it was mostly grad students. And there are a few reasonably famous people who were on that, like Mike Humer at University of Colorado Boulder, and then Brian Kaplan, who's also a semi-famous economist at George Mason, I forget where. And some other people too. They were by no means the smartest people on the list, but they were both smart. Yeah.
It's really showing the power of the early web, being able to communicate and discuss philosophy with hundreds of different people at once. I don't believe this was possible before.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So Jimmy Wales was also on the list, and so we had more of an opportunity to interact. And then at some point, so back then, Jimbo was kind of a jerk sometimes. And not to say that hasn't changed, but it was, we got into some acrimonious philosophical disputes.
Okay.
And at one point, he, I think, like, asked for my phone number and gave me a call after some, and I was like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's like, asked for my phone number. I said, okay, whatever. And we talked, and, by the end of the conversation, it was, I think smoothed over a little bit. And then, let's see, again, I was sort of like on the outside of the Ayn Rand movement, sort of looking in, kind of interested, because there weren't any other people who had quite my cast of mind in philosophy, right?
Yeah.
But they were maybe the closest. Also some libertarians.
It was a tight circle.
Yeah, and also libertarians, but libertarians were even nuttier, actually, in some ways.
Yeah.
So I actually went to a couple of conferences. I think I went to two.
Is that when you met Jimmy in person?
Yeah, in person the very first time. That would have been like maybe 1995, 1996 or so. So there were like a couple of years there when I actually, did some participation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like I met him, met other people, and then also on one time when I was like taking a trip out to visit my poor dying uncle who was dying of cancer at the time. Back then it was like easier to like take side trips and like not double the price of a plane ticket. So I decided to take a side trip and visit Jimmy. I think, I don't know how this was arranged exactly. And another friend of ours at the time, who we knew from the same lists, Paul Shea. Now he's a doctor. The three of us got together and just like kicked around for the weekend and just, saw sights around Chicago and stuff. Yeah.
And so the relationship was slowly forming.
Sure. Well, that actually is almost the end of it. Before we kind of lost touch for several years.
Oh, you lost touch?
Yeah, probably for about 3 years, and because then, like I was no longer participating in those lists, and I didn't really have any other occasion to
see
talk
them.
To him.
Yeah. And
not
did he reach back out to you, or did you reach back out to him?
Well, occasionally we would see. People used email back then differently. So occasionally, if you had like some sort of general announcement or whatever that you would have, you might just share it with a whole bunch of friends. You just like make up a list or whatever and just like blast it out to them. Whereas today, I guess you just do a Facebook post or whatever. I actually think that might be better than Facebook. But it's not the best way. It's just better than Facebook. Anyway, given everything else that you give up when you join Facebook. So anyway, at one point, I had been working on my first paid, web development gig, which was I started something called Sanger's Review of Y2K News Reports. And it was basically an early blog before they were called blogs. And I was summarizing all of the important news about the Millennium Bug. And it was a pretty big deal back then.
I was so young, I don't remember it, honestly. But
No,
I know
that'd be
looking
before your time, I think.
No, I
almost.
was 4 or 5, but I just didn't pay attention to it.
Oh, yeah,
Or
yeah.
just but looking back, it was a huge scare, and the government spent hundreds of millions of dollars, I think, or millions, preparing for it because
Well, you know, it's funny. I have never seen any reporting. Probably I never looked very hard, but I remember looking, in the months after. It's like after nothing happened, it's like there isn't any follow up. Okay, can you explain what happened exactly? Was there some sort of was it just a scare, as you put it? Was it just hype that turned out to be completely false, or what? I actually think that that's not really true. I think some of the worst things, some of the worst predictions, actually could have come true.
Yeah.
And they actually did do some important work in fixing the stuff, but there weren't that many truly critical systems. That was the word that was used. There weren't that many critical systems that if they were to fail, then like the electrical grid would go down, which was the doomsday scenario that some people were
Could you imagine if Y2K happened today with Twitter and Facebook and social media? It would be so much more. The microphone would be everything would be so much more amplified.
Oh yeah, and of course, the nuts would have a much bigger voice, and there definitely were some. And I tried to sort of like not take sides, and this is actually that's one of the places where the neutrality policy, where Wikipedia's neutrality policy started, because I had a neutrality policy.
Was Y2K one of the first pages?
What's that?
Was Y2K one of the first pages on Wikipedia?
I can't tell you. I don't remember. I'm sure I wrote it. I'm sure I started it, but I can't actually remember doing so. Yeah. Anyway, let's see.
Okay.
Where were we?
Where were we with Y2K?
Yeah. Oh, right. That's right. Okay. So I blasted out an email as this Sanger's Review site was winding down, and one of the recipients of the email was Jimmy Wales, and I had this domain name, Sanger's Review, and I didn't actually want to stop working on websites because I guess I liked it.
Yeah.
And besides, I had actually quite a bit of traffic, at least for the time. Like several thousand page views or unique visitors per day. And so I wanted to like capitalize on that. But then Jimmy Wales said, well, why don't you just come work for me? And this is his reply to me. And you can be basically the editor-in-chief of this new encyclopedia website that I've started. And then he clarified, well, I haven't really started it. I've picked out the domain name, so it's going to be called Newpedia. And really, pretty much the only thing that I know about it, he said, is that it should be started on the principles of open source software. And he gave me a few examples to look at, and some things to read, like Eric Raymond's The Cathedral and the Bazaar. It's still a good essay to read even today.
What's that about?
It basically explains two different models of software development.
Okay.
And how it was possible for people getting together totally independently, not being centrally directed by anyone, were actually able to produce really good software, like production quality software. And how is that possible? So that so
they can do it with software, they can do it with knowledge.
That was the suggestion, right? Yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much how I got the job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were describing Sanger's Review, it sounded a lot like the research I would do in making Everipedia articles about topics, but you were just specifically doing Y2K.
Yeah, kind of. Except I was actually summarizing the articles themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was more of
Was it like Cliff Notes?
It's a little bit like Cliff
Oh.
Notes of the literature. So.
Yeah. Sorry. All right.
But
yeah.
The news reports about Y2K.
Yeah. And so, how did Newpedia go from being Newpedia to Wikipedia? Because it wasn't like Wikipedia where anybody can edit Wikipedia. It was different than that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So definitely not. The Newpedia system had like 7 steps. We really wanted to lock it down and make sure that everything was done really right.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory was anyway, I think I knew, like, even in the earliest months, a lot of people might not actually go for a really arduous, complex process, but we thought we would try it because that's what a lot of the early adopters were asking for, and
Okay.
It actually seemed right to us both. I think we agreed pretty well on this, that it was pretty important to keep quality levels high.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, after the first year, there were only like, I don't know, a couple of dozen approved articles and another 60 or so at some level, some stage of development.
It was very similar
very slow.
It was similar to how Encyclopedia Britannica approves their articles?
I don't think so.
No?
Yeah, I didn't get that impression. Britannica, my vague recollection from talking to them when I visited them, is basically much more traditionally edited.
Okay.
So there's basically one area editor. He finds a decent writer for it, signs it to him or her, and then gets back the article and edits it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, when did you decide? It was like, okay,
I think there's a review process, though. I think they had a review
I would assume
process.
there would be a review process.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
So you had all these steps.
Yeah.
What triggered just getting rid of those steps and just having like...
We didn't get rid of the steps.
Oh,
the Newpedia system slowly died as Wikipedia developed.
Oh.
So basically, what we were looking for beginning around September or so of 2000 was a way to get more people involved. There just weren't enough people contributing, and there wasn't enough content getting into the Newpedia system. So what we wanted to do was to create a new content stream, a new place for articles to originate. And
it's like the sandbox.
Like a sandbox. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, no, that's right. First, there was Wikipedia, which was like going to be just it was conceived of as a feeder for Newpedia, right? And then after several months, it was clear that a lot of the people who were working on Newpedia just didn't want to have anything to do with Wikipedia. In fact, that was clear from the beginning, but I thought that they would warm to it, and they didn't. So I thought what we could do is create a sort of halfway point, and we actually installed a wiki called the Newpedia Chalkboard, I think it was, and basically what I wanted to do is set up another path, a content path from Wikipedia through this chalkboard and then onto the Newpedia system. But I wasn't actually able to put very much time into managing that process at all because Wikipedia is just so active and taking up so much of my time. Yeah. So basically...
it must have been really exciting in those first days.
Was that?
It must have been really exciting in those first days.
Yeah. But basically, I made a lot of... we're skipping around here a lot. It's okay. I made a lot of proposals, probably 3 or 4 proposals to Jimmy Wales, just sort of sketching out different editorial processes, basically sets of software requirements. And he just kept saying, we can't really afford to put another person on this. We just you're going to have to find a cheaper way to do it. And he just kept replying that way. Okay, then January 2nd, I was having dinner with a friend of mine named Ben Kovitz, and he told me all about, the wikis that he had been contributing to. In fact, one of them, if I'm not mistaken, actually was a sort of an encyclopedia. But wikis before Wikipedia were different. They had two main modes of development. So there was thread mode, which is basically a discussion, and then there's document mode, and that was essentially the attempt of people to actually construct a document. But the documents weren't like with a single voice. Like one person would put something here and then another person would put something there. And a lot of times the contributions were signed.
I like to think of wikis as living documents.
Yeah, they were kind of like living documents. That's a good way to put it. Right. But again, the contributions were signed and so forth. So when we started Wikipedia, there a fair number, not even the majority, but a fair number of the people who were working on the Wikipedia in the early days were familiar with the practices of the early wikis. And so they actually a few people started doing this. Some days there weren't that many people actually contributing at all. And so there weren't that many people editing each other's stuff. But as the first few months progressed, there were some people who were like using document mode, right? And so we decided, and they were putting comments in line, which was kind of like thread mode. And so at some point in the first, I want to say 2 months, I can't remember precisely, we decided to separate these out. And we were familiar with how wikis worked. And document mode, thread mode, and they actually became the article pages and the talk pages.
Yeah.
So right, so basically, a lot of my work in the first year basically had to do with teaching people, even though I was just amazed that they didn't really understand
You're the shepherd.
Yeah. I didn't understand why they didn't understand. It's like, haven't you used an encyclopedia before? Don't you know an encyclopedia is not a dictionary? So of course it's not just going to be a definition. There were some people who would go in and they would just like make a dozen definitions. It's like, guys, this is not acceptable. Yeah. I mean, and I didn't want to like discourage people, and so I tried to be nice about it. But there were some people who were actually pretty stubborn, and they would like, they're not stupid or anything, but they just wanted the resource to be used in ways other than just an encyclopedia. So they, for example, would put a personal essay on there, or one of the
sounds eerily familiar.
Right. Yeah. And I would say, look,
it's nice, but it's not.
A Wikipedia article is not an essay.
Yeah.
Another thing, one of the partners of Bombus, so the company that actually started Newpedia, and then, of course, because it's an outgrowth of it, Wikipedia, is called Bombus. And Jimmy Wales was the CEO of Bombus. And it was a partnership. There were 3 guys.
Okay.
And the other person who was in the office the third person was an investor from Chicago, right? Old colleague of Jimmy's. But the other guy who was there, I don't know what his title was, maybe COO, or didn't matter. His name is Tim Shell. I'm still friends with Tim. And he's a very funny guy, smart. But he actually knew Jimmy Wales the same way that he knew me.
Emails.
Through actually, well, I assume email, but through the Ayn Rand connection.
Mm.
Yeah. And I believe they were both from Chicago too, or the Chicago area. So anyway, let's see. So Tim started putting up this stuff on Wikipedia that was just summaries of Atlas Shrugged. It's like one page, one section summarized, and it's like. At some point, we had to tell him, actually, because he was one of the partners, we tried not to. I mean, I wasn't in any position to be like harsh or anything with him. So we just sort of like let that, slide for a while. But it was like maybe the first 4 or 5 months. But then at that point, it's like there was such an accumulation of rules about what Wikipedia was not.
Yeah.
That a lot of that sort of material ended up being shoved into what is now called
Wiki Wasteland.
No, it's meta Wikipedia.org is what it was called. But I think they've actually put the meta Wikipedia on a separate domain, haven't they? Yeah, I think it's the Media Wiki Foundation. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
At any rate, back then, anyway, it was a subdomain. So meta.wikipedia.org. So I think there was a stage even before that.
I know that you left in 2002, but when I was writing one of my articles for Hacker Noon about why people should edit Everipedia, I was doing research on the early history of Wikipedia, and there was basically this battle between the inclusionists and the deletionists. The inclusionists thought that everything should have a wiki. They were just like, even if the page is incomplete, it can be improved. Well, and then the deletionists were like, no, we should have standards. There has to be a notability requirement.
Yeah, there wasn't such a thing in the first year when I was there. Okay. I mean, it like people started fighting about it, if I'm not mistaken, toward the end of 2001. And I remember it being a thing in 2002.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, there were so few topics that were covered in the first year. I mean, we actually produced 20,000 articles, from scratch in that first year. And a lot of those were stub articles, too. So it was a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. And it was like, it grew exponentially,
as someone
too.
Who's been making wikis, I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
But still, it was there were a lot of topics that were not covered. Is the point. And so
that wasn't really an issue because you were just trying to get as many topics as possible.
Well, within reason. We one of the early conflicts was whether we wanted to accept stub articles or not.
Okay.
And my position was, it's okay to have a stub article if there are like a few sentences beyond a definition and you intend to actually keep working on it. But if you just like put something out there and it's just like 2 sentences or something like that, that is not adequate, because otherwise it's just going to sit there forever. Yeah. And who knows how long it's going to take to actually develop. And if there's a lot of this crud just
builds up
sitting around, then people are going to get the wrong idea about what's going on.
Yeah, and so then in 2002, that's when it really started to take off?
No, it started taking off in the first year.
Oh, first year.
It started taking off in the first 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And
That's
then,
when we started noticing that Google, each time the Google spidered the site, you know, basically after a few days or whatever, they actually put the spidering data on the database, and we just got an influx, a permanent influx of new traffic. And with each new bit of traffic, there would be a new set of users who would be attracted, a higher level
you guys
of
really
active
hit
users.
the jackpot. You guys really hit that magic zone, what the Google spider was looking for.
Right.
Basically. You know,
Right.
Yeah, people,
Well, at that time, there were no free encyclopedia articles online. I mean, there were a few, but nothing really to speak of.
I wonder what influence that's had on media, because for a long time, news sites were free before they had these paywalls. I wonder if Wikipedia had influence on that, because like, oh, well, Wikipedia is free.
Perhaps. I mean, even by then, a lot of news was free. But you're right that there was a period when the news went from being mostly behind paywalls to coming out of paywalls. There's a transition period, right?
Yeah.
And then by about 2005, like almost all news was out from behind paywalls, and it was only a few, like New York Times, where there's premium content. Yeah. And now more content is going back behind paywalls, which is actually where it belongs as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely in terms of quality, because if it's not behind a paywall, then the most important thing is impressions.
Yeah.
And that dramatizes the news.
Right. And basically, this is why we've got so much clickbait in the form that resembles news, but it really isn't.
So let's fast forward. So you left Wikipedia in 2002. I want to fast forward to 2015, 2016. When you first
skipping over a lot.
Yeah, skipping over. When you first heard of Everipedia, what did you think of it?
So I thought it was pretty interesting. I can tell you a little the story how we first started talking. So like some VC introduced Mahmoud and me, said, you guys should talk to each other. You're like, I don't know, you'll hit it off or something. I don't know what the deal was precisely. I don't know why they made the intro, but they weren't wrong. And we did hit it off. And I actually talked to Mahmoud and a few of the other Genius founders.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a neat little call, I remember. And they were all like, oh, you're so wonderful. You're the co-founder of Wikipedia. And it's like, whatever, dudes.
Whatever. And then Mahmoud obviously kept in touch.
Yeah, I did. And then Mahmoud, he basically called out of the blue. I think we had a few other conversations. We could, friendly. I liked him. And he said, can you hop on a call with, some other people who were starting a new encyclopedia. And at first, I'll tell you what I thought of at the very first, even like before I saw the site, and I thought, oh boy, another set of entrepreneurs who think they understand what they're doing, and they really don't, and they're just going to get so much wrong because it's so difficult. Yeah. And that's all actually true. But the guys actually managed to do some things, and I could see in the beginning actually that they were able to do something that a lot of other entrepreneurs were not able to do, and that is to actually come up with a very interesting MVC, something that actually worked. And sure, it has some problems, but it does what it's supposed to do, and you can sort of see where it's going. And so I was also pretty impressed with, and that was just like, I think I first started talking to them maybe 6 months or so after they first started working on the site. Yeah. 4 or 6 months, something like that. Actually, Mahmoud and the other guys I couldn't actually distinguish them because I'd never met Sam and
Yeah.
Teddy, but I think they were both on the call.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. So anyway, I tried it out. I made an account. I made some edits and so forth. They were very excited about that. And gave them some advice.
Yeah.
I continued to give them advice off and on about this and that. Supported them. Kind of. I feel, even though I don't have a lot of time, and there's a lot of people who might like abuse this, I do try to like give people feedback on their stuff if I have time. And so I did that. And then, so there was a point when basically I was between gigs, and I was figuring out what I was going to do next. And I thought, okay, what I really want to do is something called Greater Wiki.
Yeah.
Which I had come up with. I even registered the domain name, and I really, really wanted to develop it. And I won't go into great detail about it, but the general idea is we would organize all the encyclopedia articles in the world. We'd put them all on a database and make them available for everyone to rate.
Yeah.
And then on any given for any given topic, there would be then multiple articles available to rate, and then you'd average the ratings and then put them in a rank order. And then also you could share information about yourself as a rater, and that would enable other people to rank and re-rank articles according to different features of yourself, like what was your college major, or your nationality, or even things like
profile,
religion, and so forth. And I thought that would be just the best possible way to create a competitor that actually engages the entire world and not just one little community like Wikipedia.
Okay.
I mean, even though it's pretty big, but it's as online communities go, it's actually pretty tiny.
It's only 10,000 editors, right?
Well, this is the last that I could find, that when they had published the numbers of people who were qualified to vote for Wikipedia administrators, the number was, I think it was 12,000.
I find it interesting that how much the editors were growing in the first decade, and then it just plateaued. Something happened, and
then actually dropped off.
Dropped off,
especially the administrators.
Yeah. I feel like that definitely had a detrimental effect.
Yeah,
because you would expect the editor community at least to like keep growing a little bit, maybe not as fast, but like still like add a few editors. You need some fresh blood.
Yeah,
but it dropped off.
So, I had a number of different possibilities. I ended actually going to work for a different guy who had like been after me in the previous year.
Yeah.
Passing up they made an offer basically when I visited them here the first time. It was like 2016.
Okay.
2016. But I liked the guys. I thought I was very impressed with the traction that they had made in the intervening year. It was like, and they had generated a lot of articles. You guys had written like boatloads of articles, and Travis had generated I don't know how many articles.
You were impressed.
I was impressed. I was definitely impressed. But I really had my heart set on a Greater Wiki, on decentralizing
and then
encyclopedias,
we basically into the blockchain.
Yeah, so that's basically how it happened. So I stayed in touch, every few months or whatever. Somebody would reach out, I'd maybe retweet something or who knows what, And then Sam called me out of the blue. It was kind of weird because this basically the startup that I had been working on was having temporary financial troubles, and I'm actually very sure that they were temporary. But at the time, I was kind of getting tired. He wasn't really paying me what I was worth anyway, but I really liked that project, and it was local, so I thought that was kind of cool to be working on. But Sam said, "Well, look, if you join us, all this stuff is going to happen. We're going to be able to raise a few $1,000,000." Yeah. And then the number went up to 30 million, after I said that I was really interested in joining. And
it was hard to say no.
Yeah. And then
the opportunity was there.
The opportunity was there. Not only that, they were able to pay me a lot more than the other guy did. And the equity stake stayed the same, which was cool. And so I felt like, the guys appreciated my value to the company. And I also really appreciated that they're on board to eventually developing the greater wiki feature. Yeah. And besides, as the guys will point out now, and they keep trying to tell me, and it is true, that the current system is gets a lot of greater wiki, a lot of that vision, not all of it, but a lot of it. Yeah. Because the whole idea is we can organize encyclopedia articles from many sources. And one of the first things that I did, in the first few months of working for you guys, was to actually reach out to some people that I have had met over the years. I mean, I won't name names because that's probably a bad idea, but there's a lot of partnerships actually waiting in the wings. People,
and I'll be right there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they're very interested in putting their content on the blockchain when it's ready. And we're getting very close to doing that. And then there's the whole issue. Okay, if there's multiple competing articles from different sources, then how are we going to decide what gets first in our so, and then are we going to actually include links to articles that are off chain? I think we should.
It's a whole process.
Yeah. So I'm realistic. I know that Rome wasn't built in a day, and this sort of thing is going to take time to actually come to fruition.
So what has
I've felt really supported by the guys, and I hope they've gotten good.
So so you've definitely traveled a lot. Speaking at different conferences around the world, interacting with different people. Yeah. What has the reception you've gotten about Everipedia from the people you've interacted with at these conferences?
It's been almost exclusively wildly supportive, and they've really I would say, like, after about 75%, 90% of my speeches, I've got a lot of people coming up to me afterwards and saying, "This is the greatest thing ever," and "That was such a great speech," and so forth.
I remember I went to a Start Engine a few months ago, and I talked to somebody that saw you speak, and he was so inspired by it. He was really excited for everything you had to say and what Everipedia is doing. You could just see the light in his eyes. Yeah. And so you must be doing some magic at those conferences, Larry.
Yeah, I just think it's so great that we've actually built as much of it as we have so far. I mean, with the front end is the next big, milestone achieved. Yeah. Yep. So, and then all the other stuff, the whole idea of the IQ network actually being the potential for hosting lots of different kinds of content that actually is something that I've thought a lot about as well. Yeah. And so I'm glad we're doing it. There's a huge need for decentralized social media.
And you just wrote an article about that.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, can you go into that?
Sure. So basically, I'm not saying that Everipedia can and should do all of the following, but what this article does is, was to help clarify in my own mind, and I hope in other people's minds, exactly how these different pieces can come together to actually result in social media being decentralized. In other words, how's it going to happen?
Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, there need to be independent, open standards for things like tweets and Facebook posts and social video sharing and various other things like that. So think of all of the different major wins in the social media space. Those should have been, when they were launched in the beginning, they should have been open protocols.
Yeah.
They and people should have been able to post stuff either on their website or somewhere off the website, and then the website would aggregate it all, and other people would be able to create other aggregators. Instead, to their everlasting shame, people like Mark Zuckerberg decided to make it a closed system, a walled garden, where it's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to build websites using their stuff.
That's how
it's not an open source.
That's how I feel about the internet today. Is I feel like most people go to just a few different sites that are closed gardens instead of the early internet, where it was just a wild west and there were so many unique web pages to visit. But now it's just everything just happens on social media mainly.
Walled gardens is the term. Yeah,
walled gardens.
That's right. So yes, and it didn't have to be that way. But this I think is part of the result of just a huge amount of money coming into the system.
Billions.
Yes. And so they just started hiring lots and lots more of really, really good developers, and they just outstripped.
And psychologists.
Yes, yes, and they just outstripped the freer, more open competition, which they were just never able to get a toehold in. But those standards, they actually have continued to develop. There actually are open standards out there now for short.
And those can be utilized on using blockchain technology, right?
Yes. There's no reason why we, for example, cannot make smart contracts that make use of those standards, so that if somebody posts a micro post, which would be like a tweet, as long as it follows the standards, right, then it will be added to their blockchain or whatever it would be. I'm not the engineer, the blockchain engineer, so I can't quite figure out exactly what it's going to look like. Yes, I'm a much broader level architect. Okay, so there needs to be, first of all, open standards, right? But then there also needs to be websites that make it possible to publish according to those standards. So if you want to go in and you want to start making tweet-like posts, but not on Twitter, and have those posts published in a feed that is that follows the standard, then you should be able to do that. That also exists. There's actually a number that of sites that follow that sort of idea.
Yeah.
And we can do the same thing as well. But the great thing is we can put it on the blockchain and people can actually start making money.
Yeah.
For doing that.
I feel like with blockchain, with this walled garden with Facebook, you're contributing all this content, but you're not getting any of it. They're just mining this data and everything. But with blockchain, and what I've noticed with Everipedia, you actually get out what you put in
Right.
with your work. And that's going to happen when these decentralized social media protocols develop. That's what's going to happen is you're going to be rewarded to your contributions to these networks.
Exactly. Okay. And then there remains the problem. So everything that I've described here, except for the blockchain piece, which I think is going to be huge.
Yeah.
The part that the problem that has not been solved is how do you get people to stop using Twitter and Facebook and so forth?
You have to build something better.
And well, yeah, you have to build something better. You can't build anything better than them, can you?
Well, they said that about a lot of things in the past. Like what could be better than newspapers?
Right. So it has to be an idea that they are inherently resistant to and would never do because it would undercut them. That's true. Wikipedia, for example, right? That's true of like I don't know, YouTube.
Yeah.
It undercut the power of broadcast networks essentially by allowing everybody to participate. That's something. No way would ABC, NBC, and CBS do that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So in the same way, I think what we need to do is do something that they would not be willing to do.
What do you think that is?
Okay. Part of the answer is blockchain, actually monetizing posts. That's going to be big. It's going to be a big part of it. Okay. But another part is we need to make it possible for people to publish their work into their friends' feeds who are still working in the digital plantations, as I call them, of social media. So let's say I've left Facebook, which I have, okay, and what I want to do is start like making posts on, I don't know, a part of my blog, for example. I can install some software, it'll appear on my blog, and that'll be great, okay? And then the way it ought to work is there should be a plugin, a browser plugin that like, say, my sister, who is still on Facebook, I want her to be able to see my stuff.
So you install the plugin.
Now, she could go to my blog, but a lot of people
don't.
They might not.
People just stay, like I said, on these few websites.
So the idea is you encourage your friends to install this plugin, and it actually uses JavaScript and CSS to update like a Facebook feed, right? And if Facebook does dirty tricks to shut that down, which I have no doubt they might be able to, then at least there could be a column that the user's browser definitely can control, right? And then the idea is when my sister logs on to Facebook, then she sees my posts there, okay? And similarly, then when she sees that, she says, "Oh, this is kind of neat. Maybe I could like start posting my stuff in the same way," and then her friends would be able to follow her in the same way that she followed me, and more and more people might move off, but still give a perhaps less feature rich, but a window in, and then that pulls people out of the big networks, so I actually think that's the killer app that needs to be made. Browser plugins that update people's social media feeds with content that actually lives off the feeds. Yeah, and
it's
then
not
not
like
just
reclaiming the old
constant advertising for the existence of content that lives off the outside of the walled gardens.
It's like Facebook's the cave, the Platonic cave, and this is the light ray showing there's another side.
I love it. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. We will be coming back with our feeds and shining the light to the outside.
There's another world.
There's another world. It's a better world. It's a decentralized world.
On that note, I would like to end this. Thank you so much, Larry.
Sure.
This is very informative. You hear that, developers? get working on those plugins. Come in at Everipedia. Join us on this decentralized journey.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you so much.
Yeah, sure.